of us here had a good opportunity to be in the physical presence of Sant Kirpal Singh Maharaj, or to have read his teachings. And he would use a phrase which he would use many times, and that phrase was "go jolly." And whenever he would meet us, he would talk about going jolly, being happy, and take life from that point of view of finding happiness, finding joy, finding fulfillment, being able to smile, being able to laugh, and just have an atmosphere which is joyous, which is where there's happiness in our life. And what is very interesting is, even though this is just 50 or 60 years ago, today many of these researches that happen, they are telling us that it is definitely better to laugh than to frown. And as we start to think about that, we find that many times things that are told to us by the great saints and mystics have a much deeper meaning than what we understand. Many times this phrase "go jolly" we would only take on the periphery. And there's a very interesting anecdote out of the life of an American journalist. His name was Norman Cousins, and he traveled out of the country in 1964. And when he traveled out of the country, where he was visiting, he got very sick. He had a high fever, and the fever got getting more and more and more, so he had to come back. So when he came back here, he was admitted in the hospital, and very quickly, the movement in his arms and feet started to get less and less and less, so practically he was unable to move his arms and feet. And the doctors who were checking him out all came to the conclusion that he had a very rare disease, where they're saying the tissues in our bodies are not relating well to each other. And they said this was a fatal disease, and hardly anyone could survive. And so he started to think to himself. And even though his body was not working well, his brains were still working, so he started to analyze, and he thought to himself, let me analyze the situation. So this is how he thought to himself. He thought, we all know that when there's stress, when we worry, when we are in depression, we get sick. That's a known fact now. Even doctors are telling us that, all the scientists are telling that when we worry too much about the past or the future, when we are depressed, we don't think that things will get better, we are in pain, then it's easy for us to fall sick. So he thought, what if we do the opposite? That means if you don't worry at all, if instead of being depressed, you're positive about life, instead of being in sorrow, you laugh a lot, then you should get well. Because if you're the other way, then you get sick, and that means if you do the opposite, you should get well. So he had this theory he wanted to put into practice. So as soon as he came to that conclusion, he started watching all the good comedies on TV. The TV. The TV in every hospital. He asked the nurses to get him some books about jokes so he could read them. He started laughing a lot. And he said that with time, his arms started to move, his legs started to move. He got to a state where he could walk out of the hospital. He did not need any more of the medicines that he was getting in the hospital. So he got well, and what is very interesting is that through being positive, through being joyous, from being jolly and happy and laughter and smiling, he got himself well, physically well. And today, there are so many researchers that are bringing us to the same conclusion. We all take life too seriously. We all think that this could go wrong, and this could go wrong, and that could go wrong, and that could go wrong. And then that becomes the cause of many, many of our illnesses, sicknesses, and other problems. Instead of looking at the positive things of life, we're always looking at the negative things of life. Because the human tendency is to make us think that, oh, I'm not doing this thing right, I should have done this thing at this time, I should have taken care of this that way. So just a waste of time. And the more we think like that, the more difficulties come in our life. And it's very interesting, and we all think that maybe all the difficulties came in our lap, everyone else as well. But someone said very beautifully, said, if you take the problems of every human being on earth and put them in a pile, and then you ask yourself to go pick up, which ones would you pick up? Everyone will pick up the same ones because they realize everyone else's were much more difficult. And so it's a question of how we look at life itself. Abraham Lincoln, there are many, many interesting aspects of his life which one can gain from. As I said, he was a very good judge of character and a very nice person, very kind, and many people would come to him when they would be, let's say, in an argument. So one time two people were having a very heated argument. And they're going on and on and on, and then they finally couldn't decide, so they came to Abraham Lincoln. And so he very patiently heard them, and so they were arguing about the fact that how long should the legs of a person be compared to their upper body. So they're discussing this and discussing that. So he heard this person, he heard that person. So he had them sit down as a court, as a judge. So he said, okay, I listened very, very peacefully and calmly to your point of view. I've listened to your point of view. And he said, now, looking at everything that I have heard from you, I have come to the conclusion that the legs of a human being should be long enough to reach the ground. So he cracked them up. They started laughing, and their argument was all done. So by putting humor into such a serious conversation, he just made sure that both of them went home happy. Because now the doctors are telling us when we laugh and when we smile, then some kind of endorphins is coming in our system, which makes us feel happy. And that happiness is what makes us deal with life in a very, very positive manner.